Alright guys, so as you can see it's 5:30 in the morning. We're up nice and early. Got a little thing to go and pick up today. A little bit of a surprise for the channel. Coming later to the builds. And saying that, let's get on the road and go get it. Wind. Missed that one.
Okay, now for the big question. What have we actually got here? Is it going to run? First we've got to work out what we're actually working with. As soon as I realised we could take the bonnet off, that was the first step, get some exposure to this motor. Then we start disconnecting the plug leads. So we already know that the motor itself is actually locked up at this point. So we want to pull the plugs so we can put some penetrine down the bores, allow it to sit for a little bit and hopefully free it up. Just inspect the spark plugs as we pull each one out, just to make sure there's no signs of damage or rust to indicate which bore may be locking it up. Got an old battery we decided to hook up. And we let the penetrine sit for about 20 minutes and then we decided to give it a crank, and lo and behold, she spun over. Now the water pump itself did not want to spin over, so we had to free that up a little bit. Sprayed a little bit of penetrine just behind the pulley itself and started playing with it. You see, the more we manipulated it, the quicker it started to turn over. Next step was finding out if we had any spark or not. Failing to do so, we decided to check the distributor. Make sure there was no sign of growth or anything inside. Decided to give the points a bit of a clean up. See if that made any difference. Chasing the power, so we checked to the coil. We had power running to the coil.
Oh, it's got power there.
Checked from the coil to the distributor. As you can see, as we kicked it over, the electricity was coming through. When we got to the end of the plug lead, we had nothing. So this brought our focus back to the distributor. Decided to just give everything a bit of a clean anyway, even though it didn't look like there was too much growth on anything. Yep. Give the rotor a bit of a clean up. Now at this stage we decided to pull the points off and give them a bit of clean underneath, and as you can see that actually made the difference. We got a bit of a spark there. Next step was put this spark plug cap back in place. After realising the battery was probably a little bit past its use by date, we decided to chuck a new battery in. We also decided to clean up the earth. It was at this stage my dad came around and explained to me how these cars were actually a positive earth back in the day. So we decided to change the terminals around, and it made a hell of a difference. Also made a bit of a difference to the kicking over with the new battery. A little bit quicker, but we'd still yet to find some more. Checking to make sure all the carb is still free, everything's free. Chuck some water in the radiator. And we realised the radiator's not holding too well. There's a few holes in a couple of the hoses by the looks of it that we'll have to take care of at some stage. Now with the fuel pump, I decided to chuck a bit of penetrine in the fuel pump and just pump it through, and slowly it started getting the sound of the diaphragm started working inside it again. So we got an old fuel tank off of one of the old bikes that I've got laying around. Hooked up a little generic fuel setup because we don't know what the state of the fuel tanks in the car are, so thought this might be a bit of a safer way. Chuck some fuel in. Primed it up and you could see the air bubbles. Might be pretty hard in the camera to actually see the air bubbles going through the line, but they were there. So we tried a bit of ether and we noticed the motor started dying, so it felt like there was still a little bit of an electrical issue going on. So we thought we'd just disconnect all the negative system to the starter motor and the solenoid, clean it all up and see if that made any difference. And it started kicking over a hell of a lot better. A little bit of choke and we nearly got it.
That was it.
A little bit of persistence, she slowly started sucking some fuel through. Eureka. She's off and running. then I realised that fan had locked up again and was smoking the belt, so we stopped. Thought we'd do a belt adjustment. Got the hose just running consistently where we're running this, just so we don't get overheating. Now the fan's turning with it, so we've got some cooling from the fan as well, and water pump should be working internally, hopefully, but we're not going to run it for too long to take any chances.
Alright guys, super excited. So as you've seen, we went to Adelaide, we picked up this little beauty here. When we got there, she was a little bit jammed up, so what we done was we pulled the plugs, put some penetrine down there, left it for about 20 minutes while I messed around checking oils and everything else. Then we come back and we just gave the bit of a motor a little bit of a rock back and forward, and she freed up pretty easily, so super sweet there. Then the next thing we did was we just chucked an old battery that we had in at the time in, just so we could chase some electricity. And we come down here, we checked that we had power to the coil here. We had power out of the coil into the distributor. We didn't have power going from the distributor to the plug though. And what we ended up doing was we ended up going in under the points, just giving the bit of a clean up, clean the contacts, got it so it was sparking. And we've just set the points roughly at the moment just to see if we could get something happening. And we've managed to get that happening there. So we've got the spark. Got the spark at the spark plugs. We give them a bit of a clean up, just clamped up the caps a little bit, got the old bike fuel tank, hooked it in with a dodgy little hose set up there. We managed to prime it up with the fuel pump. Surprisingly, I chucked a couple of squirts of penetrine into the fuel pump and just gave it a few pumps till you could actually hear the diaphragm start moving again. So then we just chucked our fuel line on, gave it some fuel. We did clean up the starter solenoid and down at the starter connection there, and plus the battery connections, just gave them a bit of clean up because it wasn't kicking over all that fast. Once we got that kicking over a bit quicker, chucked a little bit of ether down the guts of it there and just covered it over just to give it a bit of a choke, and all of a sudden bop, 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 off she went. She started popping up, and as you can see, we've got it running. So we've got plenty of coolant leaks in there, so we've got the we had the hose going in the radiator while we had it running just to keep the water flowing through to make sure it didn't get too hot. The other thing was when the very first startup, the fan belt was pretty loose, and obviously with it being sitting for so long, the water pump's probably shagged, which will be getting replaced. The whole motor will be coming out and getting replaced at some stage when we start this build. But we tightened her up and the fan started going again, so super sweet, super chuffed with this. And I want to show you a couple of things here. So the last registration that is known on this window is February 1969. So that's a long time ago, and this little beauty just fired up. I don't know whether it's been fired up beforehand or not, but the other thing is on the clock here, I don't know if you can see, we got 13,484 miles. Now, whether that's the first time round, I'm not 100% sure. Could have been done its 13,000 miles, and then it's just been sat in a really crappy spot, because as you can see, the condition of it is pretty ordinary. But at the end of the day, I'm chuffed. Super chuffed to have this. So I've got to get a few other projects out of the way before we can actually start working on this thing full on. But when we do, I can hardly wait. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to end this video. I'm going to do a couple of little bit of glimpses through the car, give you a rough idea of what this project is going to be like when we get going into it. As for that, don't forget, like the video, subscribe if you're interested in this build, and stay safe, and we'll catch you next time.
Okay guys, so I know I said this was the end of the video, but I had a little bit of a thing happen today. So what happened was there was no way I was going to leave the car out under that little carport for too long of a period of time. I wanted to get it in the shed, so I managed to push it out into the alleyway to move it into the shed. But when I come to pushing it up into the shed, there was a bit of a hill. I was on my own and I couldn't do it, so this happened. Lo and behold, the old girl still drives. How cool's that?